this incident occur?
In Waterton National Park in Alberta.
What date did this take place?
It was May long weekend of this year, 1987. 88, sorry.
Was it at night or day?
It was at night.
What time of night was it?
It was around 1 o'clock at night, or in the morning, early morning.
Just describe for me the area in which it took place.
The campground itself is fairly open, and then a lot of trees and brush just off to the side.
What distance would you estimate you were from the thing when you saw it?
Closest was, the first time we saw it, just like the shadow, was about 20 feet.
What was your first reaction?
I thought it was a bear, and I was scared and headed for the car.
What was it doing?
Just standing there.
Did it stand and walk on two legs?
Yes.
Did you ever see it go down on all fours?
No, never.
Was it covered in hair?
Yes, long hair.
What color was it?
Couldn't tell the color, but it was dark, a dark color.
How tall would you estimate this thing was?
Between 7 and 8 feet.
What would you estimate its weight to have been?
Well, that's a good question.
Heavy?
Very heavy. I would say at least 300 pounds.
Did you see any facial features?
No, none.
Could you describe its arms?
Long, very long, thin, and hairy.
Could you see if it was male or female?
No, I would guess that it was a male.
How long did you see this thing for?
When we saw it with the lights on it, we've been no more than about 10-20 seconds, between 10 and 20 seconds.
Did it ever make any noise?
Yes.
Could you describe it?
It's a type of a grunt. It'd be really hard even for a human to imitate, a real loud grunt, almost as if every time it breathed it made that noise.
Did it see you?
I'm sure it did, yes.
And what did it do?
I think it had just been watching us for a while, and eventually when we sort of took off, it seemed to get, I guess, kind of bored and just kind of wandered off leisurely on its way.
Did you smell any powerful odor before or during the sighting?
None whatsoever, no.
After the creature moved off, did you check for any footprints?
The next morning we did, but we didn't see anything.
Did you report what you saw to park officials or police?
Yes, we went and talked to the warden the next day.
And final question, in your own words, describe the incident from beginning to end. What you were doing. What happened.
Okay. Oh, we'd been playing cards, and we decided to sit around the fire for a while. And we're just talking. And Susan and Scott decided to brush their teeth, and they started walking down the path towards the washroom. And there was a noise, and Susan jumped back. She was really startled, and Scott just said, well, it's just a deer. And started sort of trying to drag her down the path a little further, and also she just screamed and jumped right back behind Darwin and I, still sitting at the fire. And she screamed, that's no deer. And we all looked up, and you could see this tall, dark outline against a tree. And I thought it was a bear too. And we all turned around and raced for the cars as fast as we could. And eventually we all got in the cars. Scott and I were in one car, and Darwin and Susan in the other. And the cars are back ends together, and our car is facing the bush. And Darwin and Sue turned the lights on in their car, and then we turned the lights on in our car, and that's when we saw that it wasn't a bear, and we could see this thing from the side of you walking through the bush. We saw it take about 10 steps. It was really long. It was dark, long hair, and it had a gait, like almost like a human, with opposite arm, opposite leg, long strides, slowly. And even when we turned the lights on it, it didn't seem to speed up or try and hide from us, just as if it was just going on its way and wasn't being bothered by anybody. And by the time we actually realized what we were looking at and sort of got our act together, we drove down the road to try and follow it, but we never saw it after that. And it was just a little while later that we ran into some other people that had described a similar sighting.
Okay, first question. Would you please state your full name?
Darwin Gillies.
Where did this incident occur?
Site C3 Crandel Lake Campground, Waterton National Park.
What date did this take place?
March 23rd, 12:50 a.m.
Was it at night or day?
It was at night, or
Okay.
early morning,
What time of night was it?
12:50 a.m.
Describe the area in which it took place.
It was a typical campground. It's a circular gravel road, and we were on an elevated campground about 3 feet high off the main path.
What distance would you estimate you were from the creature when you saw it?
When I initially saw the creature, I was about 20 to 30 yards away.
What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was surprise. I would say I thought initially it was a practical joke, because it was no bear.
What was it doing?
It was walking away from our vehicles, sort of at the 3/4 mark at an angle away from us.
Did it stand and walk on two legs?
It was walking on 2 legs when we saw it.
Did you ever see it go down on all fours?
Never.
Was it covered in hair?
Yes.
What color was it?
Black.
How tall would you estimate this creature to have been?
Initially I thought it was quite tall. I think in my anxiety or whatnot, after talking with Scott, we estimated about 8 feet tall as measured on a tree it was standing beside.
What would you estimate its weight to have been?
300 plus pounds.
Did you see any facial features?
None at all.
Could you describe the arms?
They were long arms. It was a lanky type of creature, so the arms, I would say, come well past the waist level.
Could you see if it was male or female?
Not at all.
How long did you see this thing for?
About 3 to 4 seconds.
Did it ever make any noise?
Initially, when Scott and Susan left the campground and walked towards it, it made a loud snort or a grunting sound. When they disbelieved they thought it might be a deer, and they continued to walk towards it, it grunted again. So a heavy, throaty horse sound almost.
Did it see you?
Yes, it did.
And what was its reaction?
I believe that it just was curious. It stood at our campsite at a distance away. I'm convinced it was watching us for quite a while at our campsite. The reason being is when the cards blew off the table earlier, about 15 minutes before this incident occurred, the cards blew off the table. I thought I heard this creature before make this sound, because somebody had ran towards the cards, towards the bush to pick up the cards. So I'm convinced it was standing watching us with curiosity. It wasn't afraid of us whatsoever.
Did you smell any powerful odor before or during this sighting?
No, we were upwind.
After the creature moved off, did you check for footprints?
The next morning we did. We didn't check that night. We weren't going anywhere near the bush.
Did you report what you saw to park officials or police?
Yes, we did, to the park officials.
Did you report it to anyone else?
Yeah, well, no, nobody official. I've told the story to several people.
And what was their reaction, basically?
I'd say of all the people I told, at least 90% of the people believe, knowing me, and there's some pure skeptics out there, like I was before.
In your own words, describe what happened. Just basically tell me what you were doing when it happened.
Okay. As I mentioned, we were playing cards for quite a while, till about 12:30 in the morning. Myself and Shannon sat by the campfire, and Scott and Susan joined us. After a short while, Scott and Susan decided that they were going to get ready for bed, and they decided to go brush their teeth. They grabbed their toothpaste and toothbrush and began to walk down the path. As soon as they stepped off the actual campsite towards the washrooms, we heard the first grunt or sound, and I jumped up And Scott says it's just a deer. And he grabbed Susan by the hand. They continued down the path, and this thing grunted again, a little bit louder. And this time Susan said, "That's not a deer, that's a goddamn bear." And as soon as she said it was a bear, I was up from the campfire, and so was Shannon. And I believe it was Shannon said, "Everybody just move calmly towards the cars. Let's get to the cars." And it was just a free-for-all for the cars. We just sprinted. And in the confusion, I ended up in the same car as Susan. And Shannon and Scott ended up in the other car. Our car was facing in towards the bush, sort of almost away from where this thing was sighted. And Susan was quite excited, and she wanted to honk the horn. I stopped her from honking the horn, and I looked back towards where we had seen the bear, or so-called bear, and I saw a tall shadow, a skinny shadow, and I thought to myself, what is this bear doing on its hind legs? Usually they come down off their hind legs if they are standing up. So I flipped on the headlights in our car. Or Susan flipped them on. I asked her to. I'm not too sure which. I couldn't see anything more. So I rolled down my window and I yelled at Scott to turn on his lights in his car. It was facing the other direction. And I was sort of kneeling on the seat staring out the hatch of our vehicle. And I yelled out the window again for him to turn them on. It took him a while. But when he did turn them on, that's when all four of us saw this thing, plain as day. It was essentially leaving our campground, walking at an angle away from us, across the beam of the headlights, in the middle of the bush. It was, I'd say, maybe 4 to 5 feet inside the bush from the main camp road. There was no mistaking what we saw. The thing was walking upright. It was about 8 feet tall. It was swinging its arms. It had definite arms and legs. When I reported it to the warden, I referred to him as arms and legs, not hind legs. This thing was walking upright. Immediately after spotting this, Scott came running out of his car back to me, and quite excited, and said, "Did you see that thing?" And I said, "Yeah." And we grabbed the girls and we piled into his car and we went after it. We didn't see it again. When we were circling around the campground and talking quite excitedly amongst each other and describing what we had seen, and we seen another vehicle coming towards us. We flashed our high beams at them, and they came to a stop, and we rolled down our window and we asked them if they had seen anything strange that night. There was 4 people inside that truck, 3 of them of which had seen something big and black and walking when they were on their way to the washroom. They were in Site B. And I asked them for a time. They had seen it about 12:30, 12:40, so just before us. So I'm convinced they saw the same thing. Unfortunately, they didn't. They didn't report it. That's essentially the whole incident.
Okay. First thing, would you state your full name, please?
Susan Ray Adams.
Okay. Where did this incident occur?
In Waterton National Park.
What date did this take place?
The Sunday of the May 24th long weekend, 1988.
Was it at night or day?
At night.
What time of night was it?
Approximately 10 to 1 in the morning.
Describe the area in which it took place.
It was on the outskirts of the campsite. The campsite was located about 15 miles outside of the Waterton town.
Mm-hmm. Was it heavily treed?
It was treed. There was a stream, but the stream was about a quarter of a mile away. It was bush.
What distance would you estimate you were from the creature when you saw it?
When I first saw it, I would say I would be within 10 feet of it. I startled it.
What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was it was a bear.
What was it doing?
It was standing and looking at us, and then it grunted at us when we approached it.
Did it stand and walk on 2 legs?
It was standing on 2 legs.
Did you ever see it go down on all 4s?
Never.
Was it covered in hair?
Yes.
What color was it?
I would say it was black or dark brown.
How tall would you estimate this thing to have been?
I would estimate it to be about 8 feet tall as measured on a tree, because we checked the next day.
What distance would you estimate, or what would you estimate its weight to have been? Just guessing.
Oh gosh.
Heavy, light?
It was pretty heavy. It was huge.
Mhm.
And I don't know. Maybe 600, 700, 800. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you.
Did you see any facial features?
Not really. Like there was nothing pronounced,
Mhm.
like a nose or anything. It was kind of a flat face, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, you didn't. It was too dark to see any of its eyes, its nose.
Well, I saw it like it had an eyes and a nose and a mouth
Mhm.
at first, but I didn't see anything really distinct about it. It was just like a flat face, I guess.
What color was its skin?
I don't know.
Could you describe its arms?
Yes, they were very long. The tips of the fingers came past or very close to its knees. They were really long.
Could you see if it was male or female?
No.
How long did you see this creature for?
Total?
Mm-hmm. Or like the first time you saw it when you were on the trail, and the second time you had it on the
Like the
lights?
whole length of time from when we saw it and then ran to the cars and then saw it again?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. A minute? 2 minutes maybe? Probably about a minute.
Did it ever make any noise?
Yes. It grunted at us.
Did it see you?
Yes.
What was its reaction?
It grunted at us. It warned us. Like, 'cause we were coming right at it.
Did it seem scared, hostile?
It didn't seem hostile. It didn't seem scared. It just seemed to say, hey, I'm here. And it just kind of grunted at us like a warning.
Did you smell any powerful odor before or during the sighting?
No.
After the creature moved off, did you check for footprints?
The next morning we did, and we didn't find any.
Did you report what you saw to park officials or police?
Yes.
Did you report it to anyone other than park officials or police?
Apart from telling friends, we've reported it to nobody else except you.
And final question, in your own words, describe what happened, what you were doing, how you came across this thing, and what happened in general.
Okay. It was about 10 to 1 in the morning on the Sunday, as I had indicated. And we had been playing hearts. And we had just been sitting around playing hearts. We hadn't been drinking because we had already been out there for a couple of days and we kind of partied a little bit. We were just kind of relaxing that evening. But it was really windy and our cards got blown off the table. And I was getting quite tired. So my husband and I decided that we'd go and brush our teeth and then go to bed. We went to the car, got our toothbrushes and our toothpaste, and we started down the beginning of the trail that was very close to where our campfire was and where Darwin and Shannon still were. And my husband had me by the hand, and as we started down the trail, I thought I'd heard something. And I said something that was kind of quiet. Scott, I think I hear something. And he didn't really take any notice of that because I always hear stuff because I'm kind of frightened at night when I'm camping. And we took a couple more steps and we saw a big hairy creature standing up in front of us, probably 10 feet away from us, and it grunted at us 3 times. It was like a snort like a bull. Well, I screamed, it's a bear, and I ran and I got in the car. One of the other fellows, Darwin, he got into the car beside me. Shannon ran to one car, and we looked out, and Scott still wasn't in the car. He was backing up slowly. He checked my door. I wouldn't let him in. He checked Darwin's side. It was locked too. He went to the other car that Shannon was in, and he found a door and got in. I was quite upset, like I wanted to honk the horn and wake up people in the campgrounds. But Darwin put his arm on me and he said, no, just calm down, relax. And he said, turn on the headlights. And the 2 cars were facing, the bumpers, the back were facing each other. So we put our headlights on, and we looked around. I didn't see anything, and Darwin thought he saw something moving by the fire or towards the trail, but I didn't see anything. And then we yelled to Scott to turn on his headlights. And Scott turned on his headlights, and we looked right out the back of the hatchback that we were in. My husband in the other car turned on his headlights, and in about 10 seconds after the headlights were on, the creature 5 seconds, the creature walked in front of the headlights. It was walking on a ridge about, I'm bad with distances, but I'd say about 30 feet or 35 feet or something from the headlights. They were shining right on it. It kind of looked back at us, but it didn't really break a stride. It was obviously getting out of there, but it wasn't really scared or anything. It was just cruising. It was about 8 feet tall. It had long arms. It was not really fat like some of the pictures we've seen. It was kind of slender, but its legs were really, really long, like they were disproportional to the body. And that's what we saw. And then my husband yelled something to the effect of, "Holy something, that's incredible, it's a Sasquatch," or he yelled something like that. And he wanted to leave the car and go after this creature, and we said, "No, we'll drive around." So we drove around the campsite. There were other sites that were not disturbed, and we drove around, and then we came to another vehicle. The vehicle flashed its headlights at us, stopped. There were 4 people in the cab of the truck, and they said, "Have you seen anything?" And we said, "No." "Well, yeah, have you seen anything weird?" And then they said that they had seen something very similar about 20 minutes earlier, but they were quite drunk, and there was only 3 out of 4 of them that had seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they weren't going to report it because we asked them. And so, fine. Then we went back to our campsite, and I wouldn't get out of my car. I wanted the keys to drive back to Calgary. Scott got into the car with me, but he was no help at all because he just went to sleep. And I stayed up all night, and I watched. And then when the deer came back, I knew it was okay to get out of my car because this creature had gone. But Darwin and Shannon stayed up all night by the fire because there are so many deer at this campsite that they eat out of your hands. But about a couple hours before we saw this creature, I had made the comment that, "Where have all the deer gone?" Like the deer had disappeared, and there weren't any deer around all that night. And then in the morning, when I saw the deer had come back, I knew that it was safe because I knew whatever this thing was had disappeared. And then the next morning, after much debate, we decided to go and report to the warden. So we went to the warden's office. We had to wait for him, and when he showed up, we told him our story.
And what was his reaction?
His reaction was, I think he thought that he was trying to convince us that it was a bear. That's the impression I got, because he kept saying, "Well, you know, bears stand up on hind legs. Are you sure it couldn't have been a bear?" Like, I think that he thought it was a bear, but he said there was no other sightings of the animal we described. But he was really nice. He kind of listened to us, but I think he probably thought that we had seen a bear.
Okay.
That's what I think.
First, state your full name, please.
My name is Daryl Scott Stonis, but I go by Scott.
Where did this incident occur?
It was in Waterton Parks, and I believe the name of the park is Crandel. I'm not sure the last part.
What date did this take place?
It was a long weekend in May, on the Sunday. Actually, it was the Monday because it was early into the morning.
Was it at night or day?
It was at night,
What time?
about 1 in the morning.
Describe the area in which it took place.
Typical area for mountains. It was rocky and short trees and ridges of rocks with moss on them.
What distance would you estimate you were from the creature when you saw it?
I saw it twice. The first time would have been between 10 and 15 feet. The second time, probably 45.
What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was that it was, I didn't believe it. But when I turned on the lights, then it occurred to me this could be a Sasquatch.
What was it doing?
The first time we saw it, me and my wife were going to the washroom to brush our teeth, and it was standing right on the path and watching us. And as we got closer towards it, it snorted like a big bull. I don't know if you've heard of a bull snort when he's chasing you, but I haven't. That's what I thought it was. And I thought it was a deer. So I kept on pulling Sue, and finally she said it's a bear, and everybody turned around and ran to the cars.
Did it stand and walk on two legs?
It was always on two legs when I saw it.
Did it ever go down on all fours?
No.
You never saw it go down on all fours?
No.
Was it covered in hair?
Yeah, I believe it must be really dark brown or else black, because I looked straight at it down the trail and I didn't really notice it until after I thought back about it.
Okay, what color was it?
I would say really dark brown or black.
How tall would you estimate this creature to have been?
Between 7.5 and 8 feet.
What would you estimate its weight to have been? Just guessing.
If it was proportionate to me, who was 6 feet tall, I would say probably in the range of 500 pounds.
Did you see any facial features?
No.
Could you describe its arms?
No, I didn't notice his arms as much as its legs.
And its legs?
Can I describe the legs?
Yes.
The thing that is most remarkable to me about this occurrence was that I watched it from the time I turned on my headlights when we were pointing straight at him. And he took maybe 3 strides to cover the distance that my headlight shone at 35, 40 feet. So I would say he had about a 5-foot strand, or a 5-foot stride, and he was big. He moved really quickly for a large animal, and his legs were very straight as compared to a human when he walks. A human breaks his legs more when he walks. This animal kind of swung them straight with a little break in them.
Was it running or walking?
Walking.
Could you see if it was male or female?
No, but if it were an animal with breasts, then I would say it was male, because we didn't see any breasts.
How long did you see this creature for?
I saw it twice, once when we were heading down the trail, and I would say that was probably a total of 10 seconds. And then we went and got back into the car and turned on the lights, and I think I saw it for a grand total of 3 or 4 strides, 5-foot strides. I think that would be probably another 10 seconds or 5 seconds.
Did it ever make any noise?
Yeah. It, like I said before, it made a sound like a bull when he's chasing you. And I can remember that because I was chased by a bull once through the bush, and it just stands out in my mind. That was the sound he made. And I was surprised by this. I reflected on the sound later, because I don't think a human being could imitate that sound, because it was so, like it was an animal with a big throat and blew out a lot of air.
Could you describe it as a snort, a scream?
A snort.
Did it see you?
Most definitely.
What do you think its reaction was? Was it scared?
No. I would say this animal was never scared. He was 10, 15 feet away from us, looking right at us. And I would say it's more startled than anything. Like, we were coming down the trail right towards him. Let's warn these people, so I'm going to snort.
When you were walking down the trail, was it just facing towards you?
Straight at us.
Okay. Did you smell any powerful odor before or during the sighting?
No.
After the creature moved off, did you check for footprints?
Yes, I did. But in that area, like I said before, it was rocky with a little bit of moss on top of it, so you could have had an elephant move through there and it wouldn't have left any prints that I would have been capable of looking at.
Do you check for footprints right after it happened, or
No, the next morning.
Did you report what you saw to park officials or police?
To the warden at Waterton National Park.
And what was his reaction?
I think he believed that we saw something. When he first started, he tried to tell us, or tried to imply that it could have been a black bear that was skinny after the winter was over because he was not eating enough. And he said sometimes when they're skinny and it's early in the spring, they stand up and they walk with their hands outstretched. So his first reaction was to try and get us to think about a bear and was this a bear. But overall, I would say that he was fairly objective. I think his purpose, when it was all over for doing the interview with us, would be to, if another sighting came up, he'd want to know about it, because if it was a fraud and it was scaring his tourists away, then he would be concerned about it. But I would say it's probably 50-50 in his mind whether we saw what we said we saw.
Did you report to anyone else
No.
besides the police?
No, we reported to the warden and we talked with it with a few friends, but not to anybody.
And the last question, in your own words, describe what happened, what you were doing before, during, and after.
We were sitting by the picnic table and playing cards, and it was a fairly windy day because our cards blew off and we had to pick them up. And finally it got late and I decided that I'd like to go to bed, so we went to the car and got our toothbrush. And then we started walking down this trail towards the bathroom that was maybe 300 feet away around the corner. And we heard this noise, snort as I described before. And Susan said, "I'm scared, I don't want to go down there." I'm not sure the exact words, but it was something to that effect. But I thought it was a deer because there was lots of deers around there. So I kept pulling her down the trail until finally she said, "It's a bear," and then everybody ran for the cars. But I didn't quite believe that it was a bear because I didn't see a bear. My wife and I had our toothbrushes and we were heading down the trail and we heard this snort. And I thought it was a deer because we'd seen lots of deers in the previous 2 days when we were camping. They're very brave there. They come right up and eat out of your hand. And so I didn't think it was anything to worry about, and I pulled my wife down the trail towards this animal, straight right for him. And she said that she thought it was a bear and that everybody ran back to the cars to get into them to avoid it. But I didn't really believe that it was a bear or anything because she gets scared once in a while. So I was walking back looking over my shoulder to see if I'd see anything, and I didn't see anything that looked like a bear. But then afterwards, when I recalled, after it had occurred, it came to me in my mind that I'd seen a silhouette of what I thought was Darwin standing beside the campfire. And it was, you know, quite a bit bigger than he was, but I thought that was just the way the fireplace was shining a shadow. But now on reflection, I know it wasn't, and I know it was this creature that I'd seen. Because it was really dark black and standing there snorting on the trail at us. So anyways, we ran back to the cars. We all got into the cars, and Susan and Darwin in the other car, they turned their lights on, but they were facing in the opposite direction. And finally I got my lights on, and this creature took 3 or 4 strides across the area where my headlights were pointing on the ridge, and it walked through the bush in that direction. And I was pretty excited about it because I thought, this must be what everybody says it is, a sasquatch. So I jumped out of my car and went back to talk to Darwin, and I wanted to go chase after it, see what it was, but my wife wasn't very keen on that. So we got in the car and we drove around the campsite until we finally well, there was people at various campsites just sitting there in front of their fire. They didn't seem disturbed or anything. As we were driving around, somebody came up and flicked their lights at us in a big truck, and there was about 3 or 4 people in the truck. And they said, "Have you seen anything?" And we said, "Have you seen anything?" And they described this creature that they'd seen. There was one guy and 2 girls that went down to the bathroom. And as they were coming back, they heard a noise, and they looked off into a distance, and they saw this big creature that they thought was a Sasquatch, and that's what they saw. But I don't think they saw it as well as we did.
And you talked to the ranger the next day?
Yeah.
And his attitude was he was trying to convince you it was a bear.
Well, I was kind of reluctant to report it at first, because I said to myself, what's going to come out of this? Probably nothing. People are going to think we're cranks. And finally, Sue and Shannon talked us into going in and reporting it. And we told him the story, and like I say, I think he was kind of halfway to believing us and halfway to thinking it was a bear.
The written report you've shown me, who wrote that?
Darwin Gillies.